Welcome to our third segment of the second hour here at the Thanksgiving edition of World Crisis Radio. And happy Thanksgiving belated to all. You'll be hearing this on the Saturday after Black Friday, and then from there on. Remember, an economy, if 70% of your economy is consumer goods, you're in big trouble. You better have it the other way around. You better have 70% capital goods and 30% consumer goods, with that 30% giving you a much higher standard of living than what you got here. But think of it. If it were hunting and gathering, there it's 100% consumer goods. There's nothing else. There's only hunting and gathering. So we're in a depression. Now let's look at the situation. Last week we talked about this worldwide frisson about how everybody is afraid of deflation, and well, it might be. I tried without success to find an article from the Washington Post, as I recall, from about 1988, 1989, after the big crash of 1987, about deflation. And the way it works is this. If you see prices begin to fall, and if key purchasing managers begin to think, well, I really need some of this stuff, but I think I'm going to postpone the purchase until next week or next month or next quarter or next semester or next year, you gradually go into a slowdown, and it's not exactly a panic, but it turns to panic when people realize what is happening. That is to say, stagflation, deflation. You're not likely to find any pure model of these things, but deflation can slow an economy very, very markedly. You can make an argument that the Japanese zombie banks post-1994, 1995 are certainly an example of that, and that the entire world is now threatened by this. Let me also warn everybody, for your own good, if we go into deflation, the most dangerous thing to have is debt. Read about it in Surviving the Cataclysm. And again, if you want to keep up with my courses, you better get yourself a copy of Surviving the Cataclysm, your guide through the worst financial crisis in human history. If you have debt, then under deflationary conditions, that debt is more and more expensive to pay back. It comes harder and harder. If you have $10,000 of credit card debt, that can grow to the equivalent of $20,000, $30,000 if you get that kind of deflation. So this has to be avoided. And the one merit, I guess, of Draghi, right, Draghi of Goldman Sachs, is that he realizes that there's a danger of deflation, and he's scared, and he wants to pump QE. He wants to go out and buy, unfortunately, the mortgage-backed securities. Now, don't do it. Don't do that. With the same money, the European Central Bank or the Fed or the Bank of Japan or even the Bank of China, Bank of Russia, use your money for 0% long-term loans to build infrastructure. They all say demand is weak, demand is weak. Well, create some demand. The demand is contracts, shovel-ready projects, fast rail, maglev rail, new electricity grids, ports, docks, water systems, canals, locks, public buildings, the entire array of things. We have, by the way, Alan Blinder of the formerly of the Fed, right, back to Princeton, is wondering why is it that productivity is stagnating? Well, of course, in the modern U.S. economy, productivity doesn't mean anything anymore, because productivity is often how many derivatives did you eat today. That's not productivity. But the reason for it is it's down. It used to be 3% in the up to the 60s into the 70s, end of Bretton Woods. It was 3% a year productivity increase. Now it's much less because, among other things, the infrastructure is decaying. So we have long trips and lower productivity. So all of this is true. So watch out on the debt front. If you can unload debt, this is the time. Stock market is high. Debt is dangerous. Good time to lighten up on the debt. Take some profits off the stock market table and put that in there. And of course, I don't know your individual situation, so this is a very general general piece of analysis based on knowledge and belief, and I can't guarantee the results. So now look, the slowdown. In Germany, the second quarter in Germany was minus 0.1%, negative growth. This quarter that's just ended, the third quarter, it's plus 0.1% growth. This is absolutely pathetic. If that's the locomotive, you're in big trouble. And indeed, we are. And Japan is the same thing. Now, you'll remember that Draghi came out and said that he wanted to start buying up. He wanted to have quantitative easing. He wanted to start buying rotten derivatives. Well, it's good that he wants to do something, but he's doing the wrong thing. Now, even worse in many ways is Jens Weidmann, W-E-I-D-M-A-N-N. In a speech this week in Madrid, Weidmann had a barely veiled attack on Draghi. So this is the typical Bundesbank against the world, Bundesbank against Southern Europe in this case. Weidmann's line is, there are very high legal hurdles to having the European Central Bank buy, he doesn't say buy rotten derivatives. Weidmann seems to think it's okay to buy rotten derivatives. Buy as many as those as you want. But buy sovereign bonds. You shouldn't buy the government bonds of European Union countries. And that's apparently in the charter of this crazy European Central Bank. Well, this is baloney. And, you know, in an emergency, you've got to act according to paramount national interest or paramount national interests. Let me suggest my mediation of the Draghi-Weidmann dispute, right? Tarpley for Fed head. Here I go. Tarpley for Fed head says what you need to do is get around this, first of all, by buying government bonds with the overwhelming emphasis being infrastructure bonds. And infrastructure bonds does not mean refinancing something that exists. It's got to be a bond which causes a construction project to start. That bond. That's a good bond. And you want collateral? You got it. You have the maglev. You have the reactor. You have the electricity grid. Whatever that project is, that's the collateral. That should shut up Weidmann and company. More broadly, obviously, it's absolutely grotesque. I mean, the European Central Bank, it looks like it's the design of a straitjacket that you impose on yourself. Suffice it to say, the U.S. Fed has the power to do open market operations, right? One thing you can do with open market operations is somebody tries to organize a speculative attack on your government bonds. You can use the superior power of a central bank to do a bear squeeze. You can smash them. You can reverse the market overnight, and all of their long and short stuff will lose value, and they'll be burned and bankrupted, and then they'll go away and leave you alone. But with the European Central Bank, they built that in, right? The oligarchs, in their wisdom, they said, we're going to be even worse than the U.S. Federal Reserve. We will not have open market operations because that might allow the European Central Bank to buy the government bonds of these countries. Moreover, for Weidmann, I would say to him, look at German history. You're looking at 1923. You guys are always harping 1923. Hyperinflation. And remember that in the mind of the Austrian, 1923 is the worst. It's not the worst. 1929 gave you Hitler in 3 or 4 years. 1923 did not. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome to the final segment of our post-Thanksgiving broadcast here at World Crisis Radio. So what I urge people to do, we want to keep a drumbeat on the social media in favor of Reverend Pinckney, obviously. And you should take a look at Tarpley.net, take a look at Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. In addition, on the great questions of war and peace, we've got to keep up a social media presence against General Allen, the disgraced general who is now the ISIS czar Allen. And he is pressing to start bombing Assad. That would be a wider war. The answer is no. That was, of course, always the inherent difficulty, is that once you started this bombing, there would be a neocon bid to redirect, to reroute the bombing. And this is it. That's what we're seeing right now. Time to defeat that attempt. So keep up the scrutiny on General Allen and his disgraced sidekick McGurk. Read the scabrous emails that he exchanged with his paramour from the from the Wall Street Journal, please. Wall Street Journal. And Michel Flournoy. The answer is no. No to Michel. Michel Flournoy, Flournoy, and the answer is no. No to your bid to take over the Pentagon. You're a warmonger. You're from the Center for the New American Security. You're a tool of the Petraeus-Allen cabal, and you mean to start bombing Assad while sparing ISIS and actually trying to turn ISIS more against Assad. That's the hypothesis. And, of course, we want to deplore Obama's extraordinary lack of judgment. On the other hand, he's prodded along by Madame 9mm and by R.J. Kapheim with his hunting rifle, ammunition, and knife. Now, what does this all lead to? Good problem for Thanksgiving weekend. The Gruber problem. We have the government a Malthusian bureaucrat by the name of Gruber, who said that the Obamacare Affordable Care Act had to be designed to obscure the content of the law because the voters are stupid. And of course, Republicans who live by precisely this are now shocked. They're shocked that somebody could say this about voters. Well, how can I describe? How can I decide something like this? What does a leading person in our faction say about it? Right? How about Abraham Lincoln? You'll remember the famous dictum: "You can fool all of the people all of the time, and some of the people." You can fool some of the people. Now I'm in the Bush dilemma, right? You can fool all of the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Or in Scripture, we read in Ecclesiastes, the Latin Vulgate, infinitus est numerus stultorum. And I think Cicero says something almost identical. So the Roman tradition and the Christian tradition. Ecclesiastes says the number of fools is infinite. So between Lincoln and Ecclesiastes, I think that there is a problem. Now, Gruber is not a person of goodwill, and we don't like him because he's for rationing health care, and he's PNAC, right? The MedPAC, IMAC and MedPAC. He's for these cost-cutting entities inside Medicare and in Obamacare. But now we have to talk seriously about this issue, right? There's a real issue of false consciousness. Why do people fail to follow their own enlightened self-interest? Why do people insist on voting for one of the two imperialist parties? Why don't they, as soon as there's a third party, any other choice, why don't they immediately crowd into that camp? Why don't they form a third party to somehow destabilize this duopoly and make it a little bit, less predictable? False consciousness is everywhere, and I would say one of the principal ingredients in this is cultural populism, as we warned, right? The idea that you come forward and you say, I am like you, because cultural populism and identity politics are virtually identical, and they are equally bankrupt. They say, vote for someone who shares ethnic, cultural, or other characteristics, religious characteristics that you have, or just vote for somebody who shares your obsessive prejudices. That's a Republican cultural populist or a Democratic identity politician. And the answer is that what you need is, in other words, rationality, maturity, self-government begins with a program, and that's got to be, above all, an economic program. The question to a politician is not, prove to me that you share my prejudices or my backward tendencies, right? We've heard it in so many different forms, right? The checked shirt, the horseshoe pit, the jelly beans on the desk, the motorcycle, the pickup truck, the various props that have been used. And it all leads to absolutely nothing except further oppression. There is, of course, there's a series of analyses. What's the matter with Kansas, right? What's the matter with Kansas? Well, the first thing the matter with Kansas is it's a plantation of the Koch brothers. But the second problem with the what's the matter with Kansas is the Democratic Party fails to provide a real alternative to the legitimate insecurities and economic aspirations of the people involved. The Democratic Party seems not to have very much to offer to people in the middle class who feel threatened, right? They're in a status panic, and the Democratic Party doesn't offer it. So the Democratic Party appears to be a kind of confederation of interest groups. The Republican Party, more back because it's simply the party of oligarchical privilege and its dupes on the basis of cultural populism. False consciousness is related to similar concepts of alienation. For example, what is your economic interest? What is everybody's economic interest? Well, if you look at this in the cold light of day, you'll see that there's a worldwide division of labor. You will see that your standard of living, modest though it may be, depends on a worldwide interconnected productive network. There is a world division of labor. This is a significant achievement. We have it even in late imperialism. It continues to develop, although some parts of it atrophy, and I think more atrophies than grows. There is still growth in some areas. But you essentially have a standard of living now which couldn't be done without about 5 billion people, right? If the world population is somewhat in excess of 7 billion, it looks like 5 billion, somewhere between 5 and 6 billion would be the work, depending on how this is defined. Your interest is to upgrade this worldwide division of labor, right? This world-spanning productive network. The cultural populist, and again, the most extreme is an extreme nationalist, right? The Farage or the Grillo, people like this, cultural populists. They're a form of manipulation, but it depends on alienation. The alienation that you don't understand what it is that provides your living standard. You've never been told where it all comes from, right? Stephen Colbert says food comes from the kitchen. Another kid says food comes from the supermarket. Well, no, it's got this, again, this worldwide commodity flow. So false consciousness flourishes. The political system, in particular the Republican Party, I think, is an example of self-destructive false consciousness. So we'll question open. We've mentioned alienation. There's also something called reification. There's commodity fetishism, and above all, the fetishism of money and gold, as the Poltars tell us, right? The gold freaks. So we're wishing everybody a happy continuation of your Thanksgiving weekend, and remember those priorities.